Bertrand Russell called envy one of the most deep-seated and universal of all human passions. In this explainer, we're going to look at his diagnosis of envy, not as some simple character flaw, but as this really profound and powerful obstacle to happiness that, let's be honest, all of us face. So let's start by digging into what makes it so uniquely destructive. And this right here is the heart of the problem. This is what makes envy so incredibly toxic. It completely flips how we're supposed to experience the world. Instead of finding joy in our own lives, we start to feel actual pain because of something good that happened to someone else. It turns their win into our personal loss. It's a really twisted logic, and Russell argues it's one of the biggest reasons so many of us feel unhappy, even when objectively our lives are pretty good. So here's our game plan. First, we'll define what this comparison trap really is. Then we'll get into why it feels so much worse today than ever before. We'll look at the hidden costs of envy, and then most importantly, we'll start building the exit strategy, what we can call the architecture of contentment, before we wrap up with a simple practice you can start using right away. Okay, to kick things off, we need to get really clear on what Russell was talking about. For him, envy isn't just about wanting something somebody else has. No, it's way deeper than that. It's a fundamental error in how we see the world. It's a fatal habit of seeing life only through comparison. A great way to think about this is a concept we can call scoreboard living. This is what happens when you stop experiencing your life directly, and instead you're just keeping this constant mental scoreboard of how you stack up against everyone else. Your satisfaction isn't based on your own experience anymore, it's just based on your rank. And this really highlights the huge contrast. On one side, you have genuine enjoyment. The focus is internal. It's about the pleasure of the activity itself, and that leads to satisfaction. But on the other side, you've got this measuring mode, where the focus is totally external. A good thing happens, and the mind immediately jumps to, yeah, but is this as good as what they're experiencing? That thought pattern, as Russell points out, makes true enjoyment completely impossible. It just guarantees you'll always feel dissatisfied. Now, Russell figured this out nearly a century ago, but it's safe to say he couldn't have possibly imagined the world we live in now. The modern world has basically built this incredibly powerful engine that runs on comparison, making this age-old problem feel way more intense than ever. So, how does this engine work? Well, it's a pretty simple but nasty three-step process. It all starts with our basic human wiring. We're kind of programmed to figure out where we stand by looking at others. Then we add the fuel, social media, which is just exceptionally fertile ground for envy. We are constantly slammed with everyone else's highlight reels, and the result is this low-grade, constant feeling of dissatisfaction with our own lives. And that right there is the big illusion, isn't it? We're taking the messy, complicated, behind-the-scenes reality of our own lives and holding it up against these perfectly edited, curated highlight reels of other people. It's just not a fair fight, and it's a guaranteed recipe for feeling like you're always falling behind. Okay, so what's the real price we pay for living this way? Russell is really clear that envy isn't just some passive feeling. It actively eats away at our well-being and, honestly, our character. And the price is steep. It starts with bitterness, and this inability to enjoy the good things right in front of you. It creates disconnection because you start seeing your friends and even your colleagues as competitors. But the most destructive part is that it can lead to what Russell calls a malicious impulse, where you actually start to want to see others fail because their misfortune somehow feels like a win for you. It just poisons everything and traps you in this feeling of perpetual injustice. So here's the key insight, the real turning point. We have to reframe the problem. Envy isn't some deep moral failing that's impossible to fix. It's an error of attention. It's just a misdirection of our focus. And here's the good news. If it's a problem of focus, then it's a problem we can solve by learning to direct our attention somewhere else. And that is the key that unlocks the whole thing. All right, so that brings us to the good part, the solution. The way out of this isn't to just wish envy away. It's to consciously build a new mental framework, an architecture of contentment, to replace that old, crumbling structure of comparison. The big shift we're talking about here is moving from an external focus to an internal one. We have to replace that habit of constant comparison with the deliberate practice of gratitude. And we have to consciously choose to transform the poison of resentment into the power of admiration. So this new mindset stands on three really solid pillars. First, what Russell calls mental discipline, which is really just the choice to stop entertaining these useless comparative thoughts. Second, the gratitude habit. This is such a powerful countermove, actively training your brain to see what you have instead of what you lack. And third, admiration. Russell believed that a huge part of increasing happiness in the world is increasing admiration. It's the direct antidote to that malicious impulsive envy. Okay, that all sounds great in theory, right? But how do we actually do it? Let's break down a simple, actionable exercise you can use the second you feel that envy creeping in. Let's call it the envy reset. It's a super simple 3-step mental drill. First, just acknowledge the feeling. Don't beat yourself up for it. Russell said just realizing the cause is a big step toward a cure. Second, get specific. What's the exact comparison that's hurting you right now? Name it. And third, pivot. Deliberately shift your attention. Bring to mind one thing, however small, that you are genuinely grateful for in your own life. This isn't about pretending the envy isn't there. It's about actively retraining the muscle of your attention. And you can see how this plays out in the real world. At work, when a colleague gets that promotion, you can practice admiring the skill that got them there instead of just resenting the outcome. In your personal life, you can focus on enjoying the unique path you're on instead of comparing your timeline to somebody else's. And on social media, you can consciously reframe what you see. Use it as inspiration for what's possible, not as a measuring stick for your own self-worth. And this brings us to one last really provocative thought from Russell himself. If the whole point is to be enviable, to have a life that others might admire, then what quality is more desirable than just happiness itself? It's this amazing paradox, right? By curing yourself of envy, you actually acquire the very thing that is most enviable. Happiness becomes the antidote. So if there's one thing to take away from Russell's wisdom here, it's this. Getting a handle on this particular cause of unhappiness requires a conscious, disciplined shift away from that fatal habit of comparison and towards a deliberate architecture of contentment, one that's built on gratitude and admiration. I hope this was helpful for you. We'll be covering more of Russell's ideas in this series, so be sure to check out the full Conquest of Happiness playlist. Thanks for watching.